So Modern Lifetime was actually shot in just one evening. It only took us one evening for about 4 or 5 hours, I think the shoot lasted. So it was actually done pretty rapidly, which I was quite surprised at. But there were a few challenges that we came across, a lot of them to do with sound and space issues. Obviously, like I talked about in the pre-production BTS video, I didn't really get much time to actually map out the space specifically and correctly, because I didn't really have much time besides one time to go over there and actually see the space. So that ended up being a bit of a challenge there, trying to figure out everything on the day, really. When it came to sound, I actually realized, because of who I've chosen to be in the film, the people that were supposed to be helping me make the film were now in the film. I didn't actually have anyone to record the sound. So that was an issue I had to come up with quickly, but luckily this really nice guy called Charlie, who works part-time at the production company that I work for, really kindly said he wanted the experience of working on a film set and would come and help us out and be the sound operator for this film. And the way we did it, because we didn't really have too much options and we were scrambling around at the last minute, we borrowed the Zoom H6 from my work, stuck that on a tripod and used the tripod as our boom pole, and that ended up being our sound. So in this film there are a lot of mistakes. I won't shy away from saying that. There are tons of mistakes in this film, tons of things I would have done differently, and lots of things that I really wish looked better and couldn't help, doing anything about. But at the end of the day, I'm also happy that those mistakes are there, because like I said also in the pre-production BTS video, this is my first short film, and I don't want my first short film to be something that I'm happy with. I know whatever I'm going to make for my first short film, even if I really tried like getting a proper cinema camera and renting lenses and renting a proper crew and everything, I'm gonna hate whatever that first short film is, and I don't want it to be something that I tried really hard at doing. I wanted it to be a learning experience, and that's what it ended up being, which I'm really happy with, because of the format that we had to film it in for the Moment Film Festival, and the type of film that I was going for, and just the atmosphere that we created as a crew and cast was really fun, really energetic, and we had a good time making it. And I'm happy that those mistakes are there, because like I said, learning experience. It was a learning experience for everyone, and we know what to do better for the next film, which is actually going to be put a lot more effort and detail into. So in a moment, I'm going to be using my webcam on my computer and going through Photoshops and going through screenshots of parts of the film, parts of Modern Lifetime, and I'm going to be talking about how I chose to do everything, what my mindset was about the lighting setups and the camera angles, and why everything looked the way it did, what did come off, what didn't come off. And I'm just going to, be using Photoshop as a little drawing tool so I can circle, highlight things, because we didn't unfortunately have room for a behind the scenes shooter. We didn't have anyone to do the behind the scenes shooting for this film, so that's what I would normally like to combine, a behind the scenes little B-roll sequence with this sort of thing in the future for my future films. But this will do for now, and this is how we did the production on Modern Lifetime. So this is the format that I'm going to be showing you, the behind the scenes on how we did the production of this short film Modern Lifetime. As you can see here on Photoshop, I've got Photoshop open and I've got my webcam set up, and I'm just going to be going through some screenshots of the film just so you can, have a little look into the mindset of what I was going through in production, having a look at what I was trying to achieve and seeing what I could have done differently, what I could have done better, and what I did well. And, maybe talk about those little things that people might not have noticed that I did, purposefully, that help enhance the actual film, but you might not really notice what's going on. Okay, so let's just get straight into it. Obviously, this is the title. It's just there just to hide the first thing. Now, the first thing I do want to go through actually are my mistakes. More specifically, the mistakes that were under my control that I could have done something about. And there was one very obvious mistake that I made. And then there was also a little mistake that I didn't really see, but I should have noticed, and maybe most people didn't see, but someone that watched it did point it out to me, and I was like, oh, I didn't even notice that. Let's just jump straight into it. The first very obvious mistake is this, for people who have watched the film. So this is quite an easy mistake. Can you see it? I really hope you can if you're in filmmaking, because this is quite a bad one. But yes, this shot, and it was like this a couple of times in the film, it is completely overexposed. And the reason for this is obviously, as people know who are watching this was shot on a mobile phone. So this was shot on my phone, the Samsung S10 5G version. And it was shot like that because we are entering this film, and we have entered this film into the Moment International Film Festival, which is, just to explain quickly again, a short film festival where you're only allowed to use a phone as a camera, but you're allowed to use any other equipment that you want as to help enhance the production, and then you're only allowed to make it a maximum of 3 minutes long. Now, to try and film this, I was using Moment's app that you can purchase from the App Store or the Play Store. And one of the functions that I did like about it, that I really wanted to use it for, because it would have helped so much, and it would have, if it worked, it would have helped in this situation as well, is the exposure lock they have on there. Obviously, in actual cameras, it's not something you actually have to worry about because you don't ever use anything on auto, so the ISO is going to be set completely at one point, so is your shutter speed, and so is your aperture. Those things are going to stay the same. They will not change unless, you want to and you actually physically change them yourself. But obviously, for the most part, in terms of exposure, mobile phones actually have an auto exposure so that they adjust their exposure compared to what you have in focus or what the main subject is in your frame. So, for example, if you are looking at something that's in the shade on a really bright sunny day, then it will expose for everything that is in the shade. And then everything around it will be a lot brighter, which is, an example of what you can see here. Because it was trying to focus on one of these two actors' faces, it was actually compensating for the fact that they're in the shade, trying to brighten up their faces, and then, in fact, it actually blew out everything in the background because it wasn't really exposing for anything there. I need to actually try and remember to use my paintbrush, considering that's why I'm on Photoshop. And essentially, that's why you have this whole sea of mess of, just blown outness here. It's just that everything is just been compensated for the shade on the actors' faces rather than the light on the actors behind the actors. So to give you the other example, if you were pointing it into the sun, then the sun would be exposed and everything around the sun would be a lot darker. So that's how mobile phones compensate for exposure. And for some reason, and I don't know why, and it's really annoying because it's giving me this stuff which I do not like, but for some reason I just could not fix it. Maybe it was a glitch, the fact I had a new phone or I had recently downloaded the app, but for some reason the exposure lock was not working on the Moment app for me on the day. And I was like, great, the one day I'm going to need this, the one day, nothing, absolutely nothing. So yeah, unfortunately, this isn't something that could have been helped. Even I tried grading and tried to bring back details, but even in the Moment app where you do shoot in some form of something similar to a RAW capability, you can't bring back the details that aren't there because everything was just blown out. So unfortunately, that was the biggest mistake I made, and it happened about twice. Luckily, only about 2 or 3 times, I think, during this film. But yeah, it didn't really hinder the story, so I'm happy that mistakes are being made in this first film, and that's why I'm not too fussed about trying to correct them. Okay, so if we move on to the second mistake that I made, it is not really so obvious what I did wrong, and to be honest, I didn't notice until someone pointed it out to me, like I said earlier. But essentially, it's just one small thing that people might see in the details that just kind of take it away from the story a bit. So if I get rid of this quickly, and you can see that everything's fine in this frame, and if I quickly show you the frame underneath it as well, can you see what is wrong here? So if I quickly flick it back and then turn that back off as well, can you see the mistake I made? Because to be fair, the shot actually happens quite quickly, so I wouldn't blame you if you missed it, because I missed it as well when I was editing and when I was watching it back over and over again. So if you haven't spotted it by now, what was wrong in this frame was that this hat is here, all looking fine in this shot. It's all there, all looking nice, and then if you disappear, oh look, oh wait, sorry, I need to change the brush, but she has no hat in this frame. Yeah, I didn't notice that. It's one of those classic mirror shots where you're using 2 different takes and you didn't notice the mishap in continuity. So Yeah, that was my bad. I should have really noticed that. She's wearing a hat there, but it's not there in the mirror shot. I should have made her wear the hat in the whole time. But to be fair, because I was focusing on just getting the close-up on Hannah's shot here, I didn't really notice anything in the mirror. I was just making sure that they were all acting okay, and the hat completely slipped my mind. So, yeah, that was the other small mistake that was under my control. And I don't think there were too many other mistakes that were under my control during the shoot. There are other things that maybe all of us could have done better, or we should have tried to figure out as a team, how to do something better. But yeah, I think I minimized the mistakes as much as I could, despite, my first mistake being incredibly obvious to the world. So now that I've got these mistakes out of the way, let's move on to actually talk about some good things and some things that I did to help the production and just what was going on during the day. Okay, so let's start off with the lighting setup, if I get rid of this for you. So, as you can see, this is one of the final shots from the film, and these screenshots, the next couple ones, I'm just showing you just so you know where the lights were from perspective. This one is quite obvious because the exposure lock, again, sort of messed up here. But light one is actually behind the tree over here. So you can't really see it because of what I've done there. But light number one, it was just these two panel lights I had as the light setups. And one of them was over there, had a softbox on both of them. And it was behind the Christmas tree. And my thinking behind it being behind the Christmas tree over here was that obviously the tree will actually have some like little fairy lights or some sort of Christmas lights on them. So I could actually use that panel light to emulate light coming off a Christmas tree and sort of create some sort of sense in how the room is being lit that way. And obviously it doubles back because I have so many people in the room. It doubles as a hair light and a nice separation light for the people that are coming into the left-hand side of the screen. The second light was not so obvious because I actually had to hide it behind the actors here. So it's actually like right against the wall here. So say I'm filming the way that I'm facing the actors right now, the light would be it'd be behind me, sort of like behind me to the right. And we had that bouncing off the wall because otherwise if I had that shining straight onto them, it would have been way too powerful. So I had to soften the light in some way. So I just put it on max power and bounced it off the wall. As you can see, it's actually still getting quite a harsh glow here on Dan's shoulder, which I didn't mean for it to be that harsh, but and that's still with bouncing off the wall. That could be to do with the phone's exposure. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, essentially that sort of thing is almost there. It's just a little bit too harsh. But that's the kind of separation light that I was going for. And it was just a little bit of hair light / fill light just to, give the characters the depth that they needed. And then obviously in the background, as you can see already there as well. And I'll just take off this so you can see it in more detail. Well, not more detail, just a different detail, but it's there again. We had our practical light. The practical light was more of an off the cuff sort of thing because I wanted there to be some sort of practical in this, but I didn't know how the phone's exposure was going to handle it. Obviously now we know it didn't handle it very well, but it still did act as another nice separation light and hair light for the actors, and it gave them a bit more depth, and it did add a little bit of something. I think it's better that it was there instead of being off, although as long as the exposure lock was working, because if the exposure had been like this the entire time, I would have been a lot happier, but obviously that's not the case with how the film actually ended up being. So using this 3 light setup, I actually wanted to use the light to sort of characterize who these people are going to be and use the type of light that will be on their faces, and the light setup exacerbate the personalities of these characters. So for example, if I take it off of this, Dan here, as you can see, has got sort of a split light situation going on, and I've got the same sort of setup on Agatha here, and I've got the same setup on Kristen here as well. A slightly different light setup, which I'll get into for Joe and Megan in a second. But if we come back to Dan here, so we've got this split lighting, as you can see. So I'll just draw around the split here as well so you can see. So this side of his face is lit, and this side of his face is covered in shadows. And then if we move on to Agatha, we got the same thing here. So we got a nice split down there, nicely lit there, and then a nice fall off into the shadows there. And then same with Kristen's, just a bit more. This one ended up being a bit more side on. So it ended up being a bit split there and there. So the lights are coming up here and there's a bit of shadow there. But essentially, the point of me doing this was that, like I said earlier, I want the lights to reflect who the characters are. So these three characters have split lighting because they all have something to hide. Okay, so they're not fully opened up, they're not full on lights on them, and they're not open to the world. They're also not fully carrying away in the darkness and the shadows. They're not fully hiding something. They're just hiding things. So they're not being fully truthful with the people around them. So obviously, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the film, I'm going to be talking about spoilers in a second. What Dan is hiding, or his character Kyle is hiding, is that he's going to be proposing to Rose at the end of this film. What Agatha is hiding as Jasmine is her relationship with Kristen, and she's hiding that from her brother Kyle, obviously who's Dan. And then what Kristen is hiding as Olivia is also her relationship with Jasmine. She's not too sure on how to handle that, but it's basically the fact, not more that they're in the relationship together, but more that they're hiding out in Kyle's flat together. And then when we come down to Joe and Megan, who are playing Chris and Katrina, as you can see, there is a very nice wide open glow. There's not really any shadows apart from maybe a bit here. Yeah, there's a bit of shadow here. Maybe a little bit here, but you can't really see any shadows, and that's the whole point, because these two are supposed to be, wide open books. They have nothing to hide. They are who they are on the surface, and that is who you're going to get. There was a point, obviously, where Chris was hiding the fact that he was going into Carl's flat to, just have his own little party and, have his own fun times. But that was over very quickly, and we are able to see them in full-on clean lighting afterwards since that moment ended. And then to completely contrast that, for one of the main characters, Hannah, who was playing Rose and Rose's doppelganger, we have Rose's doppelganger here, as you know now if you've watched the film. This isn't the person who's supposed to be Rose, and we got her completely covered in shadow. As you can see, all of this here, all of it covered in shadow, and all the light is coming off from behind her and none of it is coming onto her face. And that is the main point, because I wanted her character to be the most hidden, the darkest of them all, to reflect her, her inner evil. She doesn't have any light on her. She doesn't have any light within her character. Subconsciously, it should give the audience member a feeling of, something's not right with this person. They're not being treated the same as the other characters. And, I feel uneasy when I'm watching her character. That's the sort of feeling it's supposed to portray. And it might not come across it straight away, especially because it's such a short film, but that's the kind of look I was going for. As you can see, it came off quite well here as well. We got the nice fall off and the nice hair separation light as well on the edge of her body, but everything here is covered in darkness, so she is her evil intent is there. And as we come down here, we got this really, really nice split lighting for the most part during these takes here. So the split lighting there, because she's trying to be sort of genuine with him, but she's hiding a whole side of herself because she's not actually who she says she is. So the lighting, I'm actually quite happy, turned out fairly well despite the exposure lock incident. So just a couple more things to go through now for me. So first of all, I just want to talk about the props that I had, mainly just this frame here. So in this frame, we obviously have a picture of the main character with a friend of his and the other main character with a friend of hers. When in real life, they are actually good friends, and those two are sisters. So I hope they don't mind being in the film, but I don't think they actually know. So, and to be fair, we didn't even tell the actors that this was going to happen. We kind of just showed up on set with these pictures after printing them off at Asda, being like, hey, we're going to be using these. Is that cool? And if they said no, we wouldn't have used them, obviously. But yeah, they were cool with it. Dan was a bit freaked out, but yeah, my bad, Dan. But essentially, the main point that I want to come across here in this opening shot, which this one probably will go over most people's heads because it's not the most obvious thing, especially since it's only in the frame for like 3 seconds. But essentially, you can see that they're supposed to be in a relationship, Carl and Rose, but they're not in the same frame. They're in completely separate frames, and that was done purposely as well. So the fact that they're in two separate frames, one being here and one being here, that is done purposely because it shows that they're not really together as a couple. So they are in a relationship together, or at least, Kyle and the real Rose in a relationship together, but it's instantly indicating that something's not right because they're not in one frame together. They're separated. So something's not right with this relationship for this film. I've tried to signify that through the use of shade as well. So as you can see that Dan is in a white frame, a big white frame, because, he's a good person with good intentions and he's just an all-round pure person. Whereas on the other side, we have a black frame for Rose because, obviously it's not the real Rose. Her character is evil. She wants to, kill people. We never really took out the specifics there on what she was actually going to do, but basically, yeah, she is an evil person hell-bent on doing crazy things. And those two frames not only signify their relationship together throughout this film, but they also signify their characters' intentions. And for the final thing I want to discuss, which is clothing and the costume, and actually, I used this to signify just as much as I did with the lighting and with the props on the personality of these characters. So if we move on to the first one here, this is the real Rose. And as you can see, we've got her actually dressed in pink this time. A nice bright pink jumper, even though it's covered in mud and she's got wielding a crowbar. It's actually a nice bright color as opposed to contrast if I skip to this one where she's wearing all black. And because she's wearing all black, again, obviously signifies her evil intent, and it's completely contrasting to her pink jumper for the real Rose, who's actually a genuinely nice person and is more suited to Kyle than this doppelganger is. And for the most part, I tried to get everyone else to dress completely differently to each other and to the main characters. And what obviously I got, Megan is wearing some sort of if I can actually draw on the right layer, Megan is wearing this sort of party outfit for her character because, she's just like a bit of a party animal. That's all she wants to do. Joe's just, being all casual. He's sort of like this cool hipster guy who's just chill about everything. He's getting high and drunk all the time, and that's his character. And then we got Agatha and Kristen wearing just PJs because obviously they were around Kyle's to have a sleepover date together and they just want to be in sort of comfortable clothing. And then if we move on to Dan here as well, Dan is just wearing this casual jumper, just, something not too dark, something not too bright, but just, something that an everyday person would wear. And that is how I used the clothing to signify the personalities of these characters. It was all meticulously thought out and actually planned, and I feel like it actually came off pretty well in the end, despite the mistakes I've talked about in this video. So that was the behind the scenes on how we did the production for Modern Lifetime.